Hi, everybody. So we're going to go ahead and start Module 6 lectures today. We're going to start with the meaning of motherhood in Black culture. So let me go ahead and share my screen. I went ahead and did another example of a Prezi today because I thought it might be fun. Hold on. There we go. Where did I? Aha, that's not. Let me just scroll right on back. Why it wanted to start us in the beginning or not in the beginning, I don't know. But we will move right along. All right. So the meaning of motherhood in Black culture. So let's talk about this a little bit. This is a Collins piece. Pat Hill Collins is a influential sociologist. She is one of the individuals that really started working with intersectionality as a concept very early on, and really is a driving force from 80s Black feminist thought, and really taking that and vamping it into sociological research. So we're going to talk through, again, one of her research projects. And she really wants to talk about how Blackness influences motherhood. Okay, so motherhood is shaped by this idea of the mother or the caring 50s mother of white woman. And so really it is tied into some stereotypes that we've already talked about, right? Stereotypes for Black women about the mammy, the idea that they're more willing to care for their work environments or their work households than their caregiving jobs in the home, or they're less likely to be stay-at-home moms, or what have you. Not really coming in contact with or really engaging with the ideas of how generational wealth and economic instability currently is tied to racism in America. So really, some of the other stereotypes include being a single mom or that consistent working mom. So that this idea that there's not a need or a want within Black motherhood of being a caregiver, which is just inaccurate. But also that being a working mom somehow it makes her incapable of being a true mother or what have you. So again, this links some of the things that Collins talks about are these links to very matriarchal structures within African cultures, and how some of those cultural ideologies have shaped now current Black motherhood within America. And really, again, how those matriarchal structures and really very empowered women and women with very influential roles within their communities has really shaped this and formed into a survivorship mechanism within a racist society that they currently have to operate in America. So this is not to say that every Black American embodies African traditions or African culture as it is experienced in Africa currently, but really understanding that cultural roots and things that are passed down are coming from people that have been and were forced to come to this country without their will, against their will, through slavery and kidnapping. So moving right along, we're going to talk about how Black motherhood is linked to really self-actualization and that providing aspect, social activism, and community power. Okay, so again, understanding that social justice and movements for social justice and activism becomes a very systemic part of Black community, and especially in the leadership roles of a lot of activism movements we see more modernly, and even moving backwards to the abolitionist movement and moving to the civil rights movement and moving to some of these even early buck ups against how slaves experienced the world, really stemmed out of that motherhood as a concept, not just of our single individual nuclear family, but mothering as a concept within the Black community as something that needs to happen, not just individually, but again, we are women who are caring for our community, right? So, and that being a source of really community power, right? So there's this ideology that stems around Black women taking charge, Black women being powerful, being a point of authority, being a point of someone who, even if they are not your mother, if you are part of that community, they that you better damn well listen, right? Like this ideology again surrounding community first, as a survival mechanism, both and also as a part of a community structure that stems all the way back from matriarchal society structure stemming from cultures in Africa. Okay, and really talking about how this article, I love this idea that Collins poses about this idea that there are other kinds of mothers. So there are blood mothers that are possibly extended family members and kin members, and even really, really close friends that are considered your blood mothers, right? You're very singled out, like you can go to as a child to these core members of your community, and they're going to consistently be engaged in your well-being and your upbringing, right? That this is not a singular mother type raising of these children, that these children have these blood mothers or these other situations. And then there's this idea of this other mothers, right? That these authority female figures that aren't necessarily even mothers at all, but are in these leadership or like roles within the church, maybe, or roles within community organizations, are the key founders of Black Lives Matter, are, and I could go on and on and on, but these ideas that, again, these motherhood concepts are not strictly part of just the nuclear home, but they stem outside of that. And really that creates this women-centered networks, right? These networks of women that are taking part in the community of raising and rearing children, right? And it's not to say that men are just nowhere to be found in this network, but talking about motherhood specifically in this article, talking about how these networks of women really coming together and creating this as part of this empowerment adulthood. This is how you step into that role as your community leaders. This is how you step into your community, how you benefit, how you survive within the more broad racial or hierarchy that does not have you at the top, right? And so really this insistence on being but how this, again, okay, so this also embodies this idea of self-reliancy and this need to be a financial provider, need to be a resource, need to be all these things for our kids, including being a role model in some aspects. But when it comes to mother-daughter relationships, it creates dynamics because these mothers are trying to raise strong, independent, willful women within their daughters to promote survival, while also trying to be the push and pull of a role model, while also possibly taking on multiple financial responsibilities, taking on multiple leadership opportunities that leave that one-on-one nuclear family role, not necessarily, it's not primary, but as having to push and pull with all these other obligations, all these other structures that they are part of, right? And it also leaves them, especially with their daughters, of having this very disciplinary, this very overprotective, this very shielding and need to instill levels of survival so that both they can understand the plight that is of their community and help be resistance to that, while also trying to maintain safety and keep their children out of harm's way. And that becomes a very hard line to walk, right? Because you're trying to push this idea of, well, fit in, kind of keep your head down and don't want anything bad to happen to you, but also push back. Let's do this whole social movement. Let's fight for social justice. Let's be part of this group that is fighting for our own survival. And that's a very hard line to walk, especially as you're raising women to be part of this community network, to be part of this. This is your empowerment. This is your ability to be, right? Like, this is your ability to be resilient, to resist as resiliency, right? Within both for not only your community, but also your own identity personally. And so it's really interesting to see how some of these dynamics have negative consequences, because there doesn't feel like there's as much maybe emotional support or as much time spent one-on-one with these mother-daughter relationships, because these mothers are fulfilling so many other roles within their community, so many other roles financially, so many other things, and they have so many other people also fulfilling some of the caregiving roles. And so really, I think it's interesting to kind of see how both Collins highlights how systemic racism has impacted in a negative way the ability to maybe have specific key things, but also how they highlight so many areas of resilience and so many areas of resistance to these oppressive forces, that I think that there is really, really cool interplay and dynamics of how survivorship can be resistance, and how when you experience community level trauma, those traumas can be translated into community networking and community capacities that survivorship has unfortunately demanded of them, right? And so really, and again, I'm not going to make judgment calls on whether that give and take is worth it or how different it would be without oppressive forces and without racism. But I do think that these are questions that we need to pose, and questions that we need to start really thinking about as a society at large, because that encourages us to listen to the voices of Black mothers and other mothers and community leaders and Black female women that start movements like Black Lives Matter, like #MeToo, like #SayHerName, and really listen to what it is they're saying and how they are being these very strong caregiving leaders of their entire communities. And so really, I just kind of want to highlight how important it is to listen, and to, as a white person, how important it is to listen and really try to help create a situation where survivorship is not necessary, and those communities can be, and those community leadership positions can be used for so many other things at a much broader level. Like, what if these women could use their leadership roles in all the other facets of life, as opposed to having to consistently fight for survivorship? And so that's kind of where I'm going to leave that. But we will continue on with talking about revision and resistance in talking about motherhood within Indigenous communities and Indigenous feminism. All right, so I will see you again soon.